What would you do if 3 major home repairs fell in your lap all at once? Can you think of a possible plan of action easily, or would this kind of life event paralyze you financially? Today, Jackie comes on the podcast to share about this happening to her family. Jackie is a mom of 3 who works in medical sales. She's always budgeted in some form and has used the debt-free mom template for a little over a year. Let's hear her story. This season on the podcast, we are sharing stories of either covering unexpected expenses that have already happened in the past or answering questions that people have things coming up that they would like to cover. So Jackie wants to share about several unexpected expenses that kind of came all at the same time. And she's been using the pay period budget for about a year and a half now. So Jackie, before you started pay period budgeting in March of 2022, can you just tell me maybe a few examples or kind of what your approach would have been or how you would have felt about unexpected expenses, especially bigger ones?
I think that before 2022, well, we did always have some sort of emergency savings account. And we always had a bucket of money there. But it was kind of like a do not spend. Under no circumstances will we ever touch this money. It is, just like there in case there is a natural disaster. I don't know.
The very worst happens.
The very worst. Your car explodes on the side of the road and you're in like North Dakota and you have to buy a car, right? Like something awful. And then as far as budgeting went, I know you didn't ask really that, but we use like an Excel spreadsheet and we would just put like where we spent our money. We didn't really put like food or groceries or other, we didn't have it categorized.
Mhm.
So things would just get like jumbled. So it'd be like, oh, we spent $2,500 this month. Cool. Like,
Yeah.
moving on. And it was just like, what did we get for it? So
Yeah.
they're like, we couldn't hold ourselves accountable. And I think that kind of plays into like holding ourselves accountable for using the emergency money too, because like we could easily just like pull from it and be like, well, we had to cover our stuff.
Mhm.
Everything was just stuff. And so before, I would imagine what we would have done is either we would have used credit cards
Mhm.
and paid them off. Like we never carried a balance. So probably would have opened up like a 0%
Mhm.
Discover card. We have done that multiple times for expenses or for things. My husband has a classic car, and if he wants to do a large project on it, that's how we've handled that because that kind of like controls his spending on it
Mhm.
versus using cash. Because if you know anything about cars, there's
Mhm.
scope creep and it's terrible.
Mhm.
So it'll start out as like a little project and then it gets bigger, but that's kind of how we have handled most of our unexpected expenses in the past, I would say, is opening up some sort of 0% card or using our emergency savings.
Okay. And then you shared that you started using the pay period budget template in March of 2022. Can you talk about why you switched to it and then also what your pay schedule is to see if other listeners can relate to the way that both of your pay schedules are organized?
Yeah. So we switched. I think I found you through some,
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
For those listening, Jackie and I live like what, 25 minutes
yes.
away from each other? Yeah.
Yep. So I think I found you through somebody else that like shared your thing. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then I was like, oh, I think that we could probably implicate that. And at the time, I think you only had like the free one available and
Mhm.
then you had the $9. And I was like, well, if I'm going to do one, I want to at least support her because I'm not just going to do the free thing. She put all this effort into it. Like, I mean, $9 gets you like 2 cups of coffee. Like,
Yeah.
whatever. And I was like, we can try it. If it doesn't work for me, like $9 is not a long investment.
Yep.
And honestly, like the hardest part about like doing the starting was inputting all of our crap. Like
Hmm.
everything was due. Like, I mean, we had charges for like streaming services that I didn't even know that we had,
Hmm.
which now I hear those like Rocket Money commercials and I'm
Yeah.
like, I know all my streaming
Yeah.
services. So no one's
I
taking
do.
my money from
When
me.
I see those commercials, I'm like, I can't admit, like, especially when they're like, "Oh, did you realize that you had 3 Netflix accounts or something?" And I'm like, "How is that happening?" I
I
see it and I'm like, "I can help. Let me help you."
That's literally what I think too. Every time I'm like, well, clearly they don't budget.
Yeah.
So honestly, I stumbled across your Instagram. I was like, I'm going to do it. So when we first started, Matt and I, my husband and I had the same fees, like pay schedule.
Mhm.
So we were both paid every other Friday
Okay.
or really Thursday.
Yeah.
And so it was super easy to input like every single, it was it all made sense. And then
Mhm.
what we did as a unit is we split a lot of our bills. So like our
Mhm.
mortgage we pay every 2 weeks to make it even. So
Mhm.
our money, it was almost identical. So we could just spend evenly all the time.
Yeah.
Well, in January of 2023, late January, my husband got let go from his job and he took a different job in March. Now he got severance, so like we never lost pay.
Sure.
So we were very, very fortunate that he had
Yeah.
severance the whole time. And he actually ended up having a month where he was paid twice
Okay.
from both companies. So that was
Sure.
really, but now he's paid once a month, which I know a lot of like your local listeners probably have his
Mhm.
family paid
Yes.
once a
Yep.
month. And it's interesting because it's like at the end of the month and it's not always the exact same day.
Yep.
It's the same date, but not the same day, which is
Sure.
could be really tricky if you were just budgeting haphazardly. So
Yeah.
I think that that is something that has been really helpful with this schedule. So when he took the new job, we had to sit down. We sat down with two computers, like
Mhm.
it pulled up on like because we have it on Google Sheets,
Mhm.
and so we could both look at it. And I looked at our active, what we were doing right now, and he
Mhm.
looked at the one going forward, or vice versa. And
Mhm.
then we decided how to move our bills around. So we moved like where our mortgage and our car payments and our insurance and a lot of our in our daycare.
Mhm.
We have 3 kids, but we have 1 that's still in childcare full
Okay.
time. And so we pay that now. We used to pay it every other week, and now we pay it on his when he's paid.
Sure.
Because that pay period, we have like a huge influx of discretionary income.
Sure.
So it was
So
really helpful.
your columns are still biweekly, and then you're just planning for his once a month in the pay period that it falls.
Correct.
Okay.
And kind of unfortunately or fortunately, I get a commission check once a month, but it
Mhm.
always falls when his paycheck is.
Okay.
So
So it's very heavy at one pay
yes,
period.
yes. So I don't know, like, what we would have like it would have been mental gymnastics to get all of our bills paid if we didn't have a system that was visually laid out for us.
Yeah.
And like, if you're on the fence about pay period budget or you're not sure if like it's gonna work for you, my urgence to you would be that the visual aspect of it is so helpful. Like,
Mhm.
even if you don't like recording all of your pay,
Mhm.
all of like all of your purchases,
Yep.
just knowing when you're paid and when your bills are coming out is
Mhm.
just visually so reassuring to
Mhm.
know. Like, I can tell you in January of next year, like when my bills are due. And
Yep.
it's awesome. Like that mental relief, like
Mhm.
that long math isn't there. Like that space is
Yeah.
filled for growth freeze or something else.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times people think that when it comes to identifying extra money that is available towards their goals, that it's very retroactive, that you just have to wait and see. Like you wait and look at your bank account. And once you feel like you've covered all your bills, then you can look at your bank account and decide to put money in your goals. And the mapping out of the pay period budget allows you to see it preemptively where you can look forward and like I can tell and I'm sure you can do the same thing. We both could probably say like pull up our budget and be like, yeah, in this specific pay period, I can put this specific amount into a goal even if it's 4 pay periods from now.
Yeah. So we treat our goals almost like a bill.
Mhm.
So our goals are at the bottom of our budget
Yep.
intentionally because I don't want to see them because I'll
Yeah.
spend money.
Yep.
And it automatically, like we automatically transfer it out
Yep.
whenever Matt gets paid. And it's like whatever the total is, we transfer it to Ally. We're
Mhm.
Chase makers. That's where our deposits go. But we
Yep.
choose to do Ally because Carly convinced us that the return on your
Interest rate.
savings house, that yes, that 4% was going to make me money in it. I mean, we've been there for 6 months, and I think we've made like $800.
Yeah, I
Like,
was going to say it's like people don't realize it's like hundreds of dollars.
yeah. And my husband was like, "I don't want to have 2 bank accounts," and I was like, "Well, we can just try it, and if it's awful, we can switch." And he was like,
Yeah.
"Maybe we should put everything there." And like, we've been putting more and more money there every time.
We've convinced him.
It's so funny too. Like a sidebar is we are really huge soccer fans. And so we've been listening to some podcasts about the Women's World Cup. And Ally is the biggest supporter of women's sports.
Oh. That's
So
awesome.
yeah, so they put the most dollars of any company towards women's sports,
That's
and
amazing.
50% of their yeah, 50% of their advertising budget goes there. So being an ally and support women.
Yeah, yeah, there's just another reason. If anybody needed any extra reasons, there you go.
I like heard it and I was like, that is awesome too. But
Yeah.
yeah, so that's
Okay.
how. uh
So when you switched, now you have the visual layout, which you said you like the most is being able to kind of see where everything is going to go before your money actually arrives. So that was what, about 18 months ago, March 2020, 2022, right? March
Yep.
2022 to now would be about 18 months. So now, what made you want to come on and share? What has happened recently? But honestly, as before we started recording, as we were talking, I was like, okay, our lives sound very similar because we also feel like we went from kind of smooth sailing, like, yeah, I got my budget down, I got my income, I know what we're doing, I know. I thought I knew where our money was going to go. And then within the last 2 or 3 months, it's just been like our money hasn't gone anywhere that I expected it to go. So, share a little bit about like this summer. What's been your story of working through some of those things?
Sure. So we had like three things that involved like three kind of different methods of using our money, which I think was kind of interesting, which is
Mhm.
really what I felt like I wanted to share because it wasn't just one big thing. It was three different things that we handled three different ways.
Mhm.
And it's interesting because I don't know, like I was telling Carly before we started recording, like I don't know if I would have how we would have handled them before, and I don't know if I would have had the mental space to handle them as easily as we did. But so in the last 4 months, our HVAC went out. We had to get new garage doors, and our lawnmower engine exploded. Like straight up, like there was like a fire in
I
our.
was gonna say, were there like actual flames?
I don't know. He came like running in, and he's like, "The lawnmower exploded," and I'm like, "Are you alive? Like, what happened?" So I think so we ordered garage doors first. Now our garage faces north, and so we get a lot of like snow and ice in the winter, like we are in the Midwest, and like it's very windy.
Mm,
We don't have like we have neighbors, but we have a lot of openness. We have no houses across from us. We have a golf
okay,
course, and so we get a lot of wind in the front of our home.
sure.
And I think it was like April or March where we had a big ice storm and we
Yep.
couldn't get the garage doors to come up. And my husband like pulled them really hard or something. And somehow in that, it broke our garage door. And so we've been manually opening and closing. Like we ordered a new unit and it did not fix our garage door. And so we've been manually like opening and closing it since then. And so we decided I don't know, like 8 weeks ago to order new garage doors, and that cost was significantly more than I originally intended, and we did get multiple quotes. We decided to go with a more expensive option because we liked the look and we liked a lot of the features, and it is our home, and we do use our garage door every day, and, we have a lot of assets in our garage that we wanna protect, and to us, it was money worth spending, it just still hurt a little.
Yeah.
And so we paid for the garage doors in like 2 installments, and we were able to cash flow it from a couple of like I get a commission check once a month. So from a couple commission checks and like a couple like moving some of our discretionary
Mhm.
income around, we were able to like cover that without going into savings and anything like that. But like it still took up like our extra money.
Mhm.
We could have like maybe done like like a surprise like St. Louis trip with our
Mhm.
kids or something like that. So that was kind of like totally fine, but a
Yeah.
little stressful.
Yeah, it's always nice when you don't have to pull from savings, but there's always still this is what I would have done with the money if I didn't have to do it this way, which still hurts. Not as much as withdrawing from savings, but I think it is still like it's a little bit of missed expectations or kind of like resetting expectations when before the garage doors broke, you could have like, oh, like this month we can do X, Y, and Z. And then all of that goes away and it all goes to a garage door instead. And you're like, well, that's not at all what I expected. But it's kind of that silver lining of like, at least we can cover it, even though we're not loving that we have to use it this way.
And then so I ordered the garage doors and then our lawnmower exploded basically.
Mhm.
And so we went through like kind of like a mental gymnastics about like what to do. with that,
Mhm.
whether to buy a new one or buy like a new engine or whatnot. And I think that he said that it was like $700 for a new engine. And that's kind of what we did. We looked at buying a whole new one,
Mhm.
and that was like $2,200, but that just like wasn't really necessary.
So how close together did these 2 things happen? Like, from the lawnmower and the garage door replacement?
3 days.
Okay. So, like,
I
no time. There were no additional paychecks coming or anything.
no, no, but I mean, like we borrowed his grandpa's lawnmower. Like we could have made do if we had really wanted to, or like pulled from savings or something. But like, why?
Yeah.
And there wasn't like our lawnmower is only like 5 years old. There's really
Okay.
nothing wrong with it. Like
Yeah.
it's situations like, why are we replacing it? Why would we spend the money? Like, should we spend the money? And honestly, probably like if we hadn't have just done the garage doors, we probably would have bought a new lawnmower
Mhm.
because why not? Like
Yeah.
that's just kind of like how we typically have done things. And I kind of think previous to budgeting this way, we might have even still bought a new lawnmower
Okay.
and just been like, oh well, we'll just pull from savings and it'll be fine because it's what we want. More of
Sure.
like not long term goal, but like short term, like this is what we want, we're gonna do it type
Mhm.
of thought process. So we ordered these garage doors like 8 weeks ago, and they just came like as we're recording, like last Thursday. So August 24th.
Okay.
So that was like a very long time. Well,
Yes.
on August 2nd, first or second, our HVAC went out. Like we came home, or I think actually like Matt was working from home and I came home. Like I work in medical sales, so I'm not home all day. And
Uh-huh.
I'm like, it's hot. And he's like, yeah, I felt like it was hot, but I thought maybe it was just like really hot outside because in his office, like we don't have blinds on the windows. So
Uh-huh.
sometimes it's hot. No, it was 85 degrees in our house hot. Like,
Oh my word.
but the fan was still blowing. So there was still like airflow,
Flow. Yeah.
but like it was hot.
Yeah.
I was like, maybe you should call an HVAC company. And he's like, okay. And like we knew in our minds, like it had been on the table and like this, like we were thinking about replacing our HVAC in like September, October. Like we had been like, like emotionally setting money aside, like kind of like, okay, we're going to do this. It's
Yeah.
coming. We just weren't quite there yet. We had gotten quotes already. So like at least we knew like that part of the legwork was done because our home was built in 2004. So our
Mhm.
HVAC was original. So it was like, you know, 18 years old or something,
Yep.
19 years old. I don't know.
Mhm.
I can't do math. And so it went out. We had them come and service it. The guy's like, you really need a new unit. And
Mm.
we're like, cool,
Yeah.
thanks. And he's like, it is not like if we have another heat wave, you're not going to make it through. Like, I can guarantee you, you are like, this is it. We paid the like $200 to get it fixed for the week or whatever.
Yeah.
So that was like a Tuesday or Wednesday, I think. I don't know. And then on Friday, we were talking and I was like, can we just order it? Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to be in a situation where it's,
Where the
you know,
house is 90 degrees and you have little kids.
yes. And we're packing them up to go to like my in-laws, which would be
Mhm.
fine. Like we could do it, but like, why?
Yeah.
Like we need to take care of our home and
Mhm.
ourselves, right? Like, and we have the money, like we
Yep.
can do it. It just is not fun.
Yes.
So we made the decision to do it. They came, they installed it like the next week. And the way that we decided to pay for that was different from the other two. So we decided to pay for half of our HVAC upfront in cash.
Mhm.
And then we financed the other part because we could do it for 0%.
Mhm.
And to us, it made more sense to do part of it and 0% because the monthly payment was very achievable in our
Mhm.
budget. It's like $300. It was not hard for us to cover that. And with it being 0%, like we're going to make more leaving that money in our savings account
Yep.
at the 4% than would paying it all.
Yeah.
All like now, if it wasn't 0%, like it would have been a different story. But
Mhm.
for us, this was the best. It
Yeah.
felt the best to us,
Yeah. We
especially.
had, I think, like a year and a half ago, we had a large medical bill, and same kind of thing. I mean, you can pretty much always do a 0% payment plan on medical stuff. And that was our exact same thought process. Was It was like I think it was like $3,000. And I was like, I have $3,000. I can pay $3,000, but also it's 0% interest. And I would rather have that 3,000 sitting there than send it all to this medical bill and then a month from now have a large expense that I can't do 0% interest on and wish that I still had that money. So we ended up doing the same thing as I just did 0%. I was also like very annoyed with them because I offered to like pay in full. A lot of times you can get like 20% off if you pay in full, offer cash or something. And I offered like several different things and they were like, nope, this is just the amount you have to pay. And I was like, well, then I'm not paying you $3,000 today. So yeah, I did the same thing. And then I think I ended up like, once it got down to like the total balance was like less than 1,000, then I just paid it off. But it was just nice to have that flexibility and keep, like you said, keep the cash in my pocket so that if something else also happens, then I still have some options.
And as you know, lots of things seem to happen at the same
Yeah.
time.
Just because one thing happens doesn't mean a second thing is not going to happen.
Yeah, so that's just kind of like what happened to us, and, like, we really, like, haven't experienced a lot of hard family expenses at one time that weren't, like, a vacation or, like, a new car, like, things that were, like, kind of fun, like,
Yeah.
this was fun.
Right.
I mean, my garage doors are really pretty,
Yeah.
and my truck is really quiet, and my house is cold, like, it's not that fun. Although last week, I was so grateful, like, the Lord really provided by having ours go out before.
I was going to say it was brutal here last week.
I know, and then today it was, like, 57 when I got up. I was like, "Nice 60-degree swing."
Yeah, I know. In like 6 days. I mean, so we moved on Saturday and Saturday was our big move, but Friday we kind of started taking things over. And it was just like every time you open the door, you feel like you're hit with like a physical wall of humidity. It was
Right.
terrible.
Bryant got off the bus on, like, Thursday, and he was like he looked like he had gotten out of the swimming pool,
Yes.
and I was
It
like, "Oh."
Yeah, I mean, it was like my kids mentioned something like, "I'm sweating and I'm not even running or whatever." And I'm like, "It's just if you walk outside,
Yes.
your body is just gonna sweat."
'Cause if you don't live in the Midwest, we suddenly were living in a dishwasher for
Yes.
4 days.
And then it broke, and now, like you said, like, I mean, we had the windows open last night. Now it's like in the evening in the, like, low 60s, and it is
Like,
like, how did
beautiful
that
fall.
happen 4 days ago?
They just had to torture us.
What's the number one thing I see missing from almost all of the budget templates, apps, and methods out there? It's one word: when. Most budget templates are set up by month, a summary of how your income and spending will shake out by the end of the next 30 days. But this kind of budget ignores the fact that sometimes the expenses may be due before the income is available. A pay period budget not only includes your income and expenses, but it is built around when that income will be available so that you can create accurate, realistic plans for how you want to use your paycheck. When you have a budget that matches your bank account, you're freed up to put your money to work for you without wondering if you'll have enough for the second half of the month or putting money into savings that you pull right back out when your balance gets too low. Visit debtfreemom.co/store to start budgeting by pay period today with this best-selling template and mini course for only $9. You'll receive 4 tutorial videos on setting up a budget by pay period, a worksheet to help you gather your numbers into one place, and the signature budget by pay period template with space to plan out your money no matter what pay schedule you have or how many income streams you're working with. Okay, so I'm curious to know, as those things have happened now and you've taken care of them, which I love how you described different options for taking care of different things, because not only are there multiple ways to fix one problem, but it also, as you hit multiple problems within a small window of time, the way that you have to approach like problem number 3 is different than if that was the only problem, right? Because then we kind of start having to triage what we're doing and what kind of money we're holding on to. I'm curious if, as you've taken care of any of the or all of those, if it made you kind of look to the future and maybe adjust anything for, oh, well, what if this happened again? Like, do you have plans to refill your savings? Like, what's now looking forward now that those 3 things are handled in the short term? Did you have any thoughts about long term?
No.
Okay.
We honestly, like, we haven't really I haven't really thought about it yet. As you're asking this question, I was, like, trying to think about it. We have a pretty robust emergency savings, like,
Mhm.
I feel very comfortable with it. I mean, honestly, like, our major next goal is to save more money for travel.
Okay.
We have some big travel goals in the next 2 years. Our youngest is 2.5,
Yeah.
and we're getting close to potty training him, and
Mhm.
once he's potty trained, we're, like, itching to go on some
Yes.
more bigger trips with him.
Yeah.
As you know, like, there's pros and cons to the potty trained, but,
Yeah.
like, it's
It is nice to not travel with, like, a giant box of diapers or having to, like, immediately run somewhere and grab diapers once you arrive.
and I feel like just, like, emotionally, they're, like, older at
Yeah.
that stage, and so and he can tell me what he needs more,
Yep.
and so, like, I just feel like it's a big landmark, so I think as far as savings, I can't foresee personally very many more, like, big house goals, like, I
Mhm.
think that's a lie. I'm lying to you. We have 2 big house goals coming up in the spring. Just kidding. We are saving currently, I forgot. We have a big home improvement goal. We're saving for a new deck.
Okay.
So coinciding with all of this, I totally forgot because we've been saving for it for so long.
Mhm.
It's just like part of remember when I told you I had that money at the bottom of
Keep
my
it at the
budget
bottom. Yep.
that I forget about? Like we have a whole line item of deck.
Yep.
And every time I get paid, like we get paid, we put money into this
Mhm.
debt savings. And
Mhm.
so in the spring, our goal is to replace our debt and our goal is to cash flow that entirely. And we're not going to do it until we can cover it completely in cash.
Yeah.
So I don't know how many people have replaced a deck, but it is grossly expensive.
Yeah.
And we live on a golf course. So we kind of have like, not like we have to make it super nice, but like we can't just like, we have to have a
It's
professional.
publicly visible.
Yeah, and we have to have a professional do it. We have to pull all the right permits, like,
Mhm.
in previous homes that we've owned, we lived in the country and we could DIY a
Yeah.
lot more than we can in this house. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, that's gonna be a big deal. So I guess that's our next big savings.
Yeah. What I love about that answer is that that means that in the process of having to cover these unexpected things, you didn't have a moment of like, "Oh, now I see why I should have done this with savings or whatever." Because sometimes that happens where people, I can talk about having an emergency fund till I'm blue in the face, and then people are like, "Oh, yeah, that sounds good, whatever." And it's not until something happens to them that they're like, "Oh, here's why we need to have cash set aside in advance." But the fact that you didn't have a moment like that of like, "Oh, I think this is clarifying some things about why we need to change X, Y, or Z," means that before those things happen, that you did set yourselves up well to be able to handle an unexpected expense even when you didn't know what it was, how much it would be, or, when it would happen. Because I feel similar too of like as these moves and vehicles and all these things have happened back to back as is my primary feeling has just been grateful that the savings was there and that the options were there and that I think you mentioned the post I did either like last night or this morning about not feeling bad about using savings. I think that gratitude can help with that where I'm like I would love to not have to use the savings at all, but at the same time, I'm so grateful that we set it aside before we had any idea that any of this was going to come our way. Because even if we end up taking different approaches to each of the different expenses, we at least had options. Like there was at least the ability to like sit down, like you talked about, like you and your husband sitting down and kind of deciding how you were going to cover each one. And like Kyle and I have been able to do the same. And without any of the emergency fund or without discretionary, a gap between your income and expenses, the options are very, very limited. And often they're limited to borrowing.
And I think a really good point too is, like, Matt and I have always had made pretty good money. We haven't always been really good about saving or intentional about saving. Like,
Mhm.
it wasn't really until we started having kids that we were like, "Oh, we really should be, like, doing this." Because it was always like, "Oh, well, we have really good credit." We could
Mhm.
always have a credit card. We could
Sure.
always do this. And honestly, like, it wasn't I mean, we were probably married 5 years before we had more than $1,000 in our
Mhm.
savings. And I mean, we've been married 12 years now, just about, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And, it's kind of like I kind of think of the emergency savings as like saving like your 401k
Mhm.
or IRA, whatever you're doing.
Mhm.
It's okay to start when you start.
Mhm.
Just start
Yeah.
because like there's gonna be a time where you need the money. And we started it because like I think we were talking about having kids and I was like, well, what if we need money for something with
Mhm.
like a kid? Like now we have other people. But
Yep.
it's not just me.
Yeah.
Like I can't just like not work and or
Mhm.
like not have money. Like you
Mhm.
have to feed somebody else.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things that it's hard to do. I think it's an emergency savings is only hard to do because you have to really think about your future self,
Mhm.
not your current self.
Yeah.
And in so much of today, it's like now, 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 like,
Mhm.
oh, I want Starbucks. Like I can
Mhm.
order it on the app and go pick it up in three
Mhm.
minutes. Like it's
Yep.
instant.
Yeah.
Saving isn't and planning isn't instant. And it's hard to like switch.
Yeah. It's
And
so
I
hard.
think
And I think what's important is exactly what you just said, to realize that that future you is still you. So when we think about savings, we're like, oh, but I'm so limited. And it's like, well, do you want to limit yourself a little bit now or do you want to limit yourself a lot later? Because they're both you. So, like, you are going to be limited in one way or the other. But it is, like you said, it's so hard to picture what may I need 6 months from now versus what I can see right in front of my face.
right, like 6 months ago, you definitely didn't think you were going to be moving and buying a new van.
Not at all.
I could
Not
almost
at
guarantee
all.
that you were going to keep that van for 3 more years at
Yeah.
least.
Yeah. And, like, loved
And
where we
hell, it
lived, and we're like, "Oh, we're so settled." And then, like, I mean, life can just hit you, and it doesn't matter how well planned you are.
doesn't matter at all.
No.
And it's just like life is like laughing at you.
Mhm. Yeah, 6 months ago, God was like, "Yeah, enjoy the little house for now because things are coming." And I have too, and what you were saying with, before you had kids, you had always had the money to cover things and stuff. I know that this is maybe an unpopular opinion. I have so much compassion for people with high incomes because the work that I do with the custom budgets is there is no shortage of financial problems for people with high incomes. And I know it's easy for people who maybe have average or lower than average to be like to look at people who have higher incomes and be like, stop complaining, like what's your problem? I have seen time and time again, like those high incomes are hard to manage. And I like I say that very sincerely because you have this feeling of cash flowing in. So it feels like you shouldn't need to manage it that much, right? Like that it'll just kind of fall into place that we assume that we'll get to a point where like once my paycheck reaches this size, I'm almost I am going to avoid all crises, right? Like that something can come my way and I'll just be able to handle it. And that's simply not the case. And so then what people get into is it compounds because not only do they have the high income and the lack of managing it well, but then when something comes their way, they also are embarrassed that there would be a financial problem while they have a well-paying job. So then a lot of times people end up digging further into a hole to avoid the appearance of having any sort of difficulty with their finances. So I mean, custom budget after custom budget, like it is common for me to have like well into six-figure income clients come with six-figure debt and a razor thin margin between their income and expenses and absolutely no savings. Like that is a very typical client for me. And I think it's just important to say that if anybody is listening who has a high income and is basically embarrassed that their finances are kind of a mess, that it is that I have a lot of compassion for that because it is hard. It is hard to manage a high income.
Well, it's very hard too if you have like you look at your budget and you're like, oh, well, I'm gonna have $4,000 left over this month.
Yep.
It's very hard to be like, I should budget. But
Yep.
if you have $200, you're like, oh, I definitely need to like put my
Mhm.
nose to the paper. But
Yep.
then that $4,000, like you could easily be eating out every night and there is gone.
And so then it's not about it's not about what they're losing or interest that they're being charged or something, but it's the opportunity cost of what that money could have done.
Correct. I mean, I think that we probably lost out on lots of savings by eating out too much or, but like it is what it is, and, like, you can't get caught up in that, like, you can
Yep.
always do better. It doesn't matter, like,
Yeah.
hindsight's 20/20, whatever. Like, I coulda
Yep.
driven a car a year longer or
Mhm.
something too, like, okay, sure, but at the end of it, like, I'm happy with where we are, and I'm happy with the financial maturity that I have now,
Yeah.
and I one thing that I have learned, and Matt and I talk about this almost weekly, is that we want to make sure that our children
Mhm.
understand, like, how to budget, how much things cost, like,
Mhm.
I mean, how to save, like, just be aware because as a society, I feel like, at least for myself, like, I don't feel like my parents did an awesome job of talking
Mhm.
about it.
Mhm.
And it wasn't intentional by any means, but and school doesn't talk about it, you
No.
know? And so I think as parents, that's something that I really want to try to provide my children with is
Mhm.
you know, at a very young age, like, hey, the tooth fairy gave you $5.
Mhm.
You now have to put two of those dollars into your savings account
Mhm.
and you can spend the $3. Like,
Yep.
and that's normal for them now.
Right.
Like that, I want that to be normal.
I think it's hard to I feel like I felt like we always grew up with this idea of like, oh, 10% always goes into your savings. But then there was a big lack of clarity on one, what to do with the other 90%, but two, like what we've talked about at the beginning of this episode of do I use the savings? What do I use it
Yeah.
for? And
What is that
it
for?
was this sense of like put 10% into savings and never ever touch it in your whole life. And so then it's like, why so I think that's if I had to guess, that's why a lot of people our age probably then didn't put money in savings because it's like, well, if I'm supposed to put it 10% away and never touch it, then I'm basically losing it, right? Like I'm just like it goes away and I don't get to do anything with it, which sounds so much worse than being able to use it. So then we use it. But if we can teach our kids like some specific examples, especially from their own life of things that are happening in our family, of like, this is why we save so that in these situations, we can make sure we still take care of our family, then it clicks, I think, in a lot bigger way. And also just even helping them with their own little, if there's a big Lego set that is really expensive, like, okay, it's going to take a while, but we're going to commit, we're going to, follow through with your plan. And 6 months from now, you can then buy that Lego set. So helping them with that like delayed gratification of when the money comes in, it can stay with you for a while and then you can buy something with it later.
I just feel like that's just one of those areas that, like, as a person, like, I feel like there's so much room for improvement from an education standpoint. Like,
Mhm.
if I could have told my 25-year-old newly married self, like,
Yeah.
hey, take all that money that you guys got for your wedding and invest it in the stock market and don't spend it
Yes.
on a honeymoon, like,
Mhm.
or whatever,
Yeah.
like, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Cause
It's just,
I mean, we don't I don't know about you. I had like a consumer ed class in high school, but a lot of what I remember of it is like we learned how to write a check. I remember that. And then it was like really unrealistic little illustrations of like we would go to the computer lab and like plan out buying our first house or something, but the numbers were all just like completely arbitrary. Like they had no connection as a 16-year-old
mean
to like
anything.
how is this supposed to impact my life at all? And also the assumption was like it was all predicated on the fact that you're earning enough money to buy a house. So then we're all just sitting there like, "Oh, what house do we wanna buy?" and whatever, and it's like, how about we teach, like, the foundational money skills that are needed to equip someone to buy a house? Because with buying a house, there are mortgage experts and there are real estate experts that can help you. That was probably one of the processes that I on my own tried to learn the most because I just relied on experts, but budgeting, like, that we need to do that for ourselves before any of the other things can happen, and that's just not taught.
I mean, the craziest thing about buying a home, like, literal craziest thing is you go and you apply for a mortgage and they're like, "Here's a $900,000 mortgage." And you're like, "That monthly payment is more than I make a month."
Yes, exactly.
Or, like, "That's exactly all of my money ever."
Yep,
Like, "What are you thinking?"
right.
Like,
Yeah, because that's the big disconnect too, is that people think the bank is answering the question, "How
yes,
much can I afford?" And it's like, "No, you need to decide how much you
yes.
can afford."
Yeah.
And then they will tell you, like, they are highly incentivized to loan you way more money than you can afford.
Yeah.
And so you need to know what your budget is on your own decision, not what yeah, I think we were approved for something that was like the monthly payment was like, I want to say 60% of our take home pay or something.
Yeah.
And it's like, what calculations are you using to come up with this?
Like, cool, but, like, then how would I afford food?
Right, exactly. It's like you can live there and do nothing else. Don't go anywhere, don't own a car, don't
I
have
mean, when
kids.
we bought this house in December of 2019, so, like, interest rates were still low.
Mhm.
There weren't a lot of houses on the market. It was, like, pre-COVID,
Yeah,
and weird to think about pre-COVID time.
I know. Feels like 100 years ago.
So we bought this house, like, pre-COVID, and we were, like, between like, we had some requirements, whatever. We are between, like, 3 houses, and this home needed updating, but it was, like, the least expensive, and I was
Mhm.
like, "I would rather buy the least expensive house that needs changes
Yep.
than the most expensive house that needs nothing because I can choose
Mhm.
the update." This
Then
most expensive house over here, I can't afford to do any of the update.
yep.
Like, I
Yeah,
can't even afford to buy paint.
it's like, how much do I wanna be locked into versus how much do I wanna get to decide when and how much and if I make the updates is it
Yeah.
makes a huge difference on your monthly budget to do that.
And that's like when I was told you that we bought a new car like this year
Mhm.
for my husband, and we went back to your budget and we put it in for like, we did an amortization table, obviously, for paying it off
Mhm.
because that's the very first thing that you do when you go to buy a car.
Yep.
And then we put it in for like the next forever long,
Yeah.
to see just like what it would
Yep.
look like. And it was
Yeah.
like, we were like, oh, okay, like we can definitely do this. But like
Yes.
very easily, it could have been, nope.
Yeah.
Like, we were fine either way, we just wanted to, like, make sure before we even committed to buying
Mhm.
the vehicle, and pre-March 2022 Jackie
Mhm.
would not have done that.
Yeah.
And so that's, like, like, circling way back to the beginning of this discussion, like, that's definitely something in my whole decision-making process that has changed since we started using the pay period budget, is that if I'm gonna take on a new expense,
Mhm.
I'm going to put it into the expense before I even swipe the card.
What it prevents is that people get into one of two problems is either they buy a car that they can't afford, that if they would have had this tool and put the numbers in, they would see that it doesn't work. But I also feel like there are things that people can do that they choose not to do out of fear that the money won't be there. Where if they had a tool like this and could see, like you said, you put it in and you're like, yep, it works. Especially with a car. Like I think a lot of times what happens is that in their in the way that they present themselves to other people, social media or whatever, we act like we're so excited to buy a new car because it's like new and everybody's going to applaud you and whatever. But then internally, people are really afraid of making the payment and covering it and stuff. And if we have a tool that can help us make those decisions with real numbers, then we can be like what you said, where you walk into the purchase confident because you're like, we know that this is not going to have, you know, detriments to the rest of our budget. So then you get to just be excited and not be afraid.
Yeah, I'm not having to reduce my grocery budget by
Right.
2 or $300 a month
Because of your car. Yeah.
because of my car.
Mhm. That's a huge game changer for not just the little things. And that's why I think people think that it's nice to just say that a budget is not restrictive. And people are like, yeah, but it is. And I'm like, it's really, really not because it will help you be aware of what's actually available and it'll free up your decisions so that you don't go into a decision with fear or regret or frustration or whatever and you can go into it with confidence. So even if the car payment is smaller than the person who never budgeted at all, I would rather have a small payment and a lack of fear than a really, really nice car and stress every single month about making the payment. And that's where the budget is not restrictive, it's freeing.
It's just another tool that you have
Mhm.
to make an educated decision.
Yeah.
And you I wrote down that I was gonna tell you one thing. When you were talking about high versus, like, lower incomes or something, like,
Mhm.
one of the choices that, like, our family has made is to do travel sports.
Mhm.
Like, I know that's a decision, like, you guys made to not do
Yeah.
because, like, you have 4 kids and, like, doing it with 4 kids is very expensive, and
Mhm.
I have 3 kids, so 3 kids will be very expensive, but, like, to us, it was important, like, both my husband and I did it, like, we want that for our kid, whatever.
Yeah.
This weekend, we had a travel soccer game in Springfield,
Mhm.
and, like, we my in-laws, it was their wedding anniversary, their 40th wedding anniversary last weekend, and so for their present, we bought them dinner
Mhm.
out, so that used up all of our restaurant budget. So
Uh-huh.
this weekend for soccer, we had to bring all of our food, but, like, I knew that ahead of time.
Yeah.
That was like, when my husband and I decided to buy them food, I was like, "Okay, well, next weekend, we'll just pack our lunch for soccer."
Mhm.
Like, we pretty much always do that, but, like, this weekend, I was just like, "We have to do it because I
Mhm.
could on the budget." But, like, I have all of our, like, travel soccer and swim stuff, like, put in
Mhm.
there, like, budgeted, and I know, like, when Evelyn has a soccer tournament, she's gonna want, like, a tournament sweatshirt,
Mhm.
and my gosh, those things are, like, $90.
Oh my gosh.
Like, no lie, I don't know who decides. It's like 40% of the shirt goes back to the host club or something. It's like a big
Okay.
maker for the team, so, like, whatever. But,
Yeah.
like, they're expensive. So I let her
Yeah.
get, like, 1 tournament, 1 fall and 1 spring sweatshirt.
Yep.
We're going this weekend to Iowa for a tournament. It's her first away tournament, which is expensive. Like, we have to do 2 nights in a hotel, yada, yada,
Mhm.
yada. We have a travel budget for that.
Mhm.
We planned ahead a few months ago. We know it's coming, and I already put in there, like, tournament sweatshirt, like, $90.
Yep.
It's like those little things too. Like, it's not just like, yes, like, travel sports are expensive, but, like, I know even in, like, November, what our
Mhm.
expenses are gonna be for that, which is,
Yep.
I don't know, it just goes back to, like, I feel very empowered in my decision-making process for everything, even, like, from Starbucks runs
Mhm.
to tournaments and buying a car, like, all
Yeah.
of it. I know what I'm doing.
And you have a tool that it can easily like, it's not cumbersome to try and work something in. It's like, "Oh, she wants to get this. Let me just quick jump into the November pay periods, make room for it." And then
Yeah.
you can go into 'cause I mean, how many times have we all seen or been the kid or been the parent in that situation where they're like at the tournament and there's a sweatshirt and the kid really wants it and the parents are like, "No, it's too expensive," or whatever. And it's not that we don't have that money. It's that we just feel strain in our finances in general. So we feel like this unexpected expense, even if it is a sweatshirt, is going to like somehow push us over the edge or something. So having a tool that makes room for those little things allows us to decide our yeses and nos in advance and then be able to move forward without feeling guilt or stress about them.
Honestly, the very first time I felt really good about doing pay period budget, if I'm being honest, was a year ago right now, last September,
Hmm.
because we started doing our budget and we started saving every month or twice a month, I guess, for property taxes. It used to always be a scramble for property taxes. Like, the month before, we'd be like, "Oh, yeah," and, like, we'd pull for savings or
Hmm.
something. Now we, like, put the money away, every single month, and that was, like, the very first thing we started was that first March, and then I just wrote the check today because ours are due, like, September
Yep.
something.
Same.
I have to mail it, like, the 1st, I think.
Yeah.
It's like the but I think that that was the very first big purchase. Not that that's a purchase, but, like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
First payment that you were able to kind of plan for.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
weird to think
and
about.
that makes a big difference because like you've said before, it's not that you never couldn't take care of it in the past, but the way that you started taking care of it now changes the way you feel about it, even though it's the same essentially the same expense.
If I could just make every single person I know, like, budget this way, they would just feel like you have a lot more control. Like, when I have a friend that's like, "Oh, I feel like I have no money," and
Mhm.
I'm like, "Well, why do you feel that way?" And they're like, "Well, I don't have a lot of extra money at the end of the month." And I'm like, "Okay, well, where are you spending your money?" And they're like,
Yeah.
"Well, I have this, 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 this." And I'm like, "Okay, well, where did you eat dinner this week?"
Yeah.
And they're like,
What
"Well,
I think it was you that within the past couple weeks you said you were like talking to a group of moms where one of them was kind of like, "Well, come on, like you make enough to go do this."
yes, yeah." And I mean, I get that often, they were wanting to go do something, and she's like, "Yeah, don't you make enough money to, like, go somewhere?" And I was like, "Yeah, but it doesn't fit my goals."
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
it
exactly.
it wasn't that I couldn't do it,
Mhm.
and I can do it, but, like, I didn't wanna go spend. I think it was, like, going to dinner with them or something, and I was just
Yeah.
like, I ate beforehand and, like, went for a couple drinks.
Yeah.
I was like, "I don't wanna spend $50
Mhm.
on a meal when I could've use that $50 to achieve this.
Yeah.
And it's just that, like, I now know that, and, like,
Mhm.
I can make the decision, and even, like, my husband used to when he was in the office all the time, he would go out to eat, like, I would tell him he could go out, like, we discussed, like, 2 days a week, 1 or 2
Mhm.
days, and he'd be like, "Okay," and he go out, like, 1 to 4 days a week, and I'm like, "Oh, so you're spending, like, $100 a week eating out."
Yeah.
He's like, "So?" And I'm like, "But that's a lot of like, that's fine if that's what you wanna do, but then
Yeah.
we're eating out as a family. Like,
Right.
it's either you by yourself or all of us doing 1 meal,
Yeah.
and, like, your choice."
Yeah.
And
And I
then
think I think once you have a tool where you can see the numbers
Mhm,
clear, then you have the ability like the conversation that you just described between you and your friends is like you have a really clear list of your priorities. And so
mhm,
you see where dinner out fits in your personal priority list. And then you've made the decision like, oh, I actually have a lot of things that are higher priority than that. And so it makes it easier, even if it's not easy or, you don't want to necessarily, but it's still like, even in my short-term self wants to say yes to every dinner out with all of my friends all the time, but I have a clear idea of what my long-term priorities are, and so I'm going to choose those over this one today. It doesn't have to be all the time, but just today.
and I think that because I said no, we actually ended up doing happy hour at a friend's house, and, like, all of our kids came, and it was, like, way more fun than, like,
Yeah,
I think it would have been just, like, going to a restaurant.
you're having a good influence.
It's just one of those situations where, like, yes, I can say yes, and,
Mhm.
like, I do, like, my job, I get to do a lot of dinners out,
Mhm.
so, like, I do eat out a lot,
Yep.
so I don't feel like, personally, like, I have to ever eat out,
Yeah.
where I know, like, my husband, he likes to eat out
Yep.
because he doesn't, like, really get that chance, right?
Yeah, sure.
So, like, what I've been doing, though, is when I have a work dinner, I'll order myself an appetizer, like, I'll eat, like, a salad and an appetizer, and then
Uh-huh.
I'll meal and take it home.
Take it home and share some.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, why not?
Yeah.
It's not my money.
Yep. I appreciate this so much because
Thanks.
I have so many similar conversations to what you're describing where people are more thinking about it in the hypothetical like what if my HVAC went out? What if I needed this? So I love that I don't love that these things happen to you. But I love that once it happened that you are willing to come share about it so that other
Yeah.
people can be like, "Oh, there are options for taking care of it in if this would happen to me too."
Well, you had one on your last season where they had to switch their budget or they were setting up their budget and they were paying differently.
Mhm.
Like, and that you were talking about, like, pay schedules,
Yep.
and it was right around the time that Matt got laid off and was looking for a new job, and he switched pay schedules, and it, like, empowered me to stick with the pay period budget
Yeah.
and adjust how we were spending our, like, reoccurring bills.
Sure.
So, if I can tell, like, what we did a
Yep.
little bit, and it can help somebody, like, understand, like, it's really okay to finance something for 0%. It's
Yep.
really okay to have unexpected expenses. It's really okay to buy the new garage doors because they're pretty and
Yep.
spend a little bit more money because it's what you want. Like,
Yep.
you work hard for your money. You can spend it. Like,
Yep.
I give you the power to do what makes you happy, but, like, do it within the confines of, like, what you can afford.
Have the pleasure of the purchase without the regret of the cost.
Right. Yeah, that's great. That should be your tagline.
There you go. Tagline for this episode for sure.
But yeah, it's like one of those things, like, if my little story can help, like, a couple people
Yeah.
and maybe spark some conversations, like, even in, like, your DMs with somebody like,
Mhm.
"Oh, okay, I have this coming up," or like your van saga is a great
Mhm.
I mean, it's all great.
Yep.
It's
That's
all
what we've said so many times in our house as a joke, like, when all these terrible things are happening, Kyle's like, "Oh, it makes good content."
it does, but, like, it still sucks.
What I hope people hear from what you're describing too is also anybody who is feeling hesitant about budgeting because again because of the restriction factor listening to all the things that you listed that you were able to do because of a budget is like, oh, maybe I would actually be able to do more by planning out my money instead of less.
We have more freedom and definitely more confident in
Hmm.
spending money on things. Like, we just paid for, like, we have last year and this year, we're gonna have a company come put Christmas lights up
Hmm.
because the risk there of, like, my husband getting on a ladder just it's not worth it to me.
Yeah.
We had a friend whose husband fell off like a second story and broke his pelvis and was down for like 6 months. Like, I
Yeah.
can't have him do that.
No.
I have 3 little kids. Like, I no, thank you.
Yeah.
But like, I put it in the budget, no problem.
Yeah. Yep.
Like, anything like that. Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
It
even going to like Sam's, like, I don't know. It's just like any big or small, like, it doesn't matter. And I think that that's where I used to get hung up on budgeting. Is like, I'd be like, oh, this expense is too big to go on the budget, or this
Mhm.
is too little. Like, who cares about my
Yep.
$6 coffee? Like,
Yep. You brought yourself more into like a almost like a equilibrium where instead of feeling like the little stuff doesn't matter and the big stuff is too hard, you
yeah,
now see that the little stuff does matter and the big stuff is possible.
I honestly like think that the little stuff means more than the big stuff
Mhm. I would
because
agree.
like those little tiny micro
Mhm.
changes, those micro activities, those
Mhm.
micro charges, like those little suckers add up.
Yep. Yep.
And like,
Compounding works not just in the stock market. It also works in those little habit changes and those little purchases as well.
yeah, I mean, like if you went to, I mean, I don't get coffee every day, maybe, but maybe like once a week, if that. But if you went every day, like that is
Yep.
half my grocery budget,
Yeah.
Like,
And even with like for someone who does go, I think we have an all or nothing idea. It's like if you go every day, it's like, well, I'm not quitting that. That's something that that I like. It's like if you go from 7 days a week to 5 days a week, people doubt that that has an impact, and it has a huge impact.
if you're hell bent on getting coffee 7 days a week,
Hmm.
and that is the hill you want to die
Hmm.
on, give up getting your nails done.
Yes. Yep.
Or get your hair colored, space it out from
Hmm.
every 8 weeks to every
Yep.
12 weeks. Like,
Yep.
there's little shifts like that. And
Hmm.
once you see it, I truly believe that, like, once you see it, like, on paper, over the span of, like, the 6, 8, 12
Hmm.
weeks, you play with the numbers, and Excel's super easy because you can just hit the back button and it goes
Hmm.
back to the original. Don't be scared, Excel's
Yep.
easy.
Yep.
And then, like, you play with those enough, you can really see, like, how little micro changes can really positively impact
Hmm.
the long term in your bigger goals.
Yeah. Yeah.
In
For
fact,
sure.
your goal has to be big.
Right. Yeah.
Like, if your goal is to be able to afford coffee 7 days a week,
Hmm.
that is perfectly fine.
Yep. Yep. And the little bit of effort of making it work and making sure that the long-term stuff can still happen then frees you up to then go get the coffee every day without having to just like the decide once idea is like if you planned it out and you decided this is my priority, I worked it into the budget, then go do it.
Yep. It's like the cooking thing, like, every Monday you eat chicken, every
Yes.
Tuesday you eat a beef,
Yep.
every
Yep.
whatever.
Nobody needs more active little decisions in their
And
day.
that's the other thing too is that I feel like really the budgeting has freed up a lot of my mental space
Mm,
to feel free for everything else.
yes.
Because where it used to be, I'd be at the grocery store and I'd honestly be like trying to add my grocery.
Mhm.
Like, okay, I know that I only have like this much money left in my checking account. And
Mhm.
this is all I can spend.
Mhm.
So stressed about it, I'd forget to buy like bananas,
Yeah. Yep.
And now I like go to the grocery store and I just like buy what I need because
Yep.
like I, I know it's gonna be
Yep.
fine.
Because you did just a little bit of effort on the front end then opens that for going without stressing. Yeah. I
Or you
totally
get like
agree.
your air conditioning bill and it's like $300 instead of like
Mhm.
50 like you thought.
Mhm.
You're like, well, that's unfortunate, but that's next month and I can adjust these two things and it's
Yep.
good.
Well, thanks, Jackie, for taking some time out of your morning to come
Oh,
share. I am very thrilled, like I said, to share this with other people and also to talk to you face to face. I feel like we've had tons of interaction in DMs and stuff, and book club, and so this is awesome to have a little bit of one-on-one time. I feel there's like a short list of people where I'm like, oh wait, I actually haven't met that person in real life, even though I feel like I have, and you're
I
one
know
of
you
them.
next
I think one of my favorite takeaways from Jackie's story is learning to be a problem solver. When it comes to our money, we won't always be able to accurately predict what's going to happen. When we approach our finances in a problem solving way, we can identify the solutions that will work best for our family, and they won't always be the same as what would work best for someone else. I love how her and her husband worked through each of these problems one at a time, balancing using their savings with using the money available from their regular paychecks and then even strategically using debt. When it comes to the unexpected in your finances, the more you can lean into listing possible solutions, the less you'll feel stuck. One of my favorite things to tell myself in these kind of situations is I'm not stuck. I just don't know which door I'm going to walk through yet, but I will. So when you're faced with these things that come out of the blue and are so expensive, remember that you might feel stuck, but you aren't stuck. There are solutions. They may take creativity. They may take temporary sacrifices and changes to what we thought would happen, but there are ways to get through it and come out on the other side with more experience and ready to face whatever comes next. Thanks for listening to the Debt Free Mom podcast. If you want to join me as a guest on the show, go to dfmpodcast.com. The Debt Free Mom podcast is hosted by me, Carly Hill, and is produced, edited, and mixed by Kyle Hill. Music for this episode was written by Kyle Hill. Hit subscribe wherever you're listening to join in with every new episode as we grow our confidence and contentment in our personal finances.